corners of the triangle where we have a people, process, and technology. We have to balance them. How do you evolve or legacy process or disrupt it or retire it?
The most important thing in terms of making sure processes are effective as the company scales and grows, in my personal opinion, right? Your product itself doesn't stay the same, it changes. When the product changes, your end customers changes.
Behind every decision, there is a person with a perspective. This is where they get heard. This is The Bottom Line by Scale Fusion.
Today I have Sai Prakash, one of my old friend, approximately 15-year-old friend of mine, in this episode with me. Sai, you work as a global head for operation and infrastructure in Dunnhumby. Welcome, Sai, in the podcast.
Hi, Kunal. Hi, everybody. I think it's a pleasure to be on conversation with Kunal and looking to share some of my experiences and looking forward to this interaction.
I'm Kunal Thakur, Chief of Staff for Scale Fusion. Today, in the bottom line, the interesting topic which we are looking at, where every leader come across it and they keep on going with that situation in their professional career, is balancing people, process, and technology for the sustainable growth. Uh, so, I would say, these are the three corners of the triangle where we have a people, process, and technology. We have to balance them. It's like a dynamic triangle. We where we have to, if we overemphasize some areas, or if we give less focus on some area, it the entire structure would wobble, right? So with this interesting topics, I want to hear from you that how your situation from your end. You have been handling the global teams across the globe, and since I know you, uh, so how you been handling this people, process, and technology, and for sustainable growth so far?
Great question, Kunal. So, can I first introduce my role and a little more in detail, and then I'll get into the answer. It'll provide more context to the audience. So, right now, I'm with a company called Dunnhumby. Dunnhumby is part of a larger firm called Tesco. We are a customer data science firm who are building products for large retailers and CPGs aligned to them. Right. So, like you said, Kunal, it's a global firm, and my role is providing the cloud engineering platform layer as well as customer operations to a large base customer base globally spread across the globe. So that's in a nutshell what our purpose is, right? And if I have to get back to your question about how do we manage the balance between people, process, technology, I think, like you said, it's a complex triangle because there is progress in each of these areas in terms of capability of our people, the evolution of our processes, and the ever-changing landscape of our technology. Yeah, so it is not stagnant, and that is where the challenge comes in. In terms of creating the balance, which is what your question was, I think it's always going to be a unique opportunity each and every time. We try to solve a purpose. The way I look at it is, instead of looking at these three blocks separately, I normally look at our overall purpose and vision for what we are trying to achieve as a company, right? And when that part is very clear, then how do we align these three pillars, like you highlighted, becomes much more simpler when we start thinking about it from a purpose standpoint. So I always think about the purpose on what we are trying to achieve, and then keeping that as a bottom line, if I might use that word, uh, as it's registered to this topic, you know, uh, then the decision making around these three areas becomes slightly simpler. Yeah. And do you want to expand on any other questions in that space?
Yeah, I mean, people who come from a technology background, let it be you, let it be me. When we try to uh, control between people, process, and technology, alignment is more towards technology first, then process, and then people, right? uh, do you think which of these three pillars do the organization underestimate mostly, right? uh, uh, I mean, it could be for the background of people. People coming from a technology background, people coming from a business background, people coming from a HR background to a leadership role. So their alignment was normally different, from this. So what do you think, which of the three pillar is always underestimated in these organizations?
Great question, Kunal. So follow-up question, I would say. So you're right when you stated, for most part, and it may not be a case for all organizations, we tend to pick a technology to solve a purpose and then try to align people and process along the lines, right? So it always, I think the place where we mostly underestimate is the people element, in my opinion. We tend to, people normally tend to be you know a line item in our cost structure, right? But we don't really think about what type of individual or group of people would you want to solve a problem in a particular way. Yeah. So in my opinion, the area where we underestimate mostly as an organization in many firms, I would say, is the people element. Yeah.
And when we're talking about people, right? So culture is the important factor when we talk about people, right? Uh, as we have been handling global teams earlier as well, and currently as well, and you have been handling that since since I know you. Uh, so I believe is, from the culture standpoint, culture is normally local, even in the global firms. It was spread up to all different countries and all, but the culture, I think, is normally local. Policies could be global, practices has to be local, because the same policies could be for the organization for different locations, and then we have different type of people in different locations. uh, so I believe the culture and the practices has to be local when we look at foster cultural alignment in a global structured uh, company.
Yeah. I think that's a great follow-up point. I'll give you my input on what you said about culture. I agree, for most part, culture tends to be more focused on the local location where that candidate is or the group of people are. But I think as global organizations continue to spread their wings across different locations and regions and continents, I am noticing that uh, the two type of cultures which emerge. One, obviously, the local law of the land, the place where you're located. How you're able to operate within that space with people and the local laws, and the company itself and how you operate within that space. And then there's also, because there is collaborative suites like Teams and Google and all of that, it tends to bring people from different areas together on a more regular basis than ever before, right? And that tends to change a little bit. It does bring in elements of culture from other parts of the globe into different parts of the world. For example, in India, right now, if you take any tech corporate world which has their global presence across any of the other regions like the US or the UK, they tend to operate more mixed in terms of how they engage, what's the ways of working, what's the rules of engagement. It has changed and evolved over a period of time, in my opinion, and it hasn't stayed stagnant. And I think that's very visible, and I think that's become very powerful as well, in my opinion, because you bring in the strengths of different regions together, and people tend to learn. They try to adapt. They try to put that as part of their ways of working, right? And that is emerging in a very in a strong way in many companies, from what I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe the different people try from a globalization standpoint, try to adapt to different cultures, which get unified in one location where they are working. Uh,
Yeah.
Coming to the process side of it, right? I normally also face certain problems, and you also might face. I want to hear from your standpoint that there are, when you get into an organization, there are very legacy processes which you identify, right? Uh, I mean, maybe in Dunnhumby or even in prior organization, you might have seen those situations. How do you evolve or evolve the existing process, or a legacy process, or disrupt it or retire it? You want to share your experience on that front?
Yeah, no, that's again a fantastic question. Follow up, a clear follow up to the culture part of your question, right? So, in my opinion, there are processes are there in place for a reason across every company, right? And I'm sure, and that exists in all aspects of our business, be it human resources, finance, procurement, recruitment. Processes exist in every company, and they're pretty unique in most companies, right? Um, and in my opinion, the first step of making sure a process really works is to be able to talk about it openly with the right kind of audience, especially the process owners, right? Keep in mind, not every process is flawless, right? It could be processes which have been put in for within your own team itself, right? And there could be processes which you're dependent on so that it can be successful in other areas of business like recruiting, finance, expense claims, whatever, right? So, in my opinion, I think the first step to disrupt or improve a process is to be able to create a culture to be able to talk about processes openly, yeah, and without any sugarcoating, being able to state that fundamentally what is working in a process and what's not working in a very clear manner. Once you're able to create that type of culture where you can talk about processes openly on the downside of what that process is and why is it not being very impactful to business, then it becomes very easy to move that needle in that direction of where you want that process to be. One thing we all need to agree is process is there to enable business in a positive manner, drive outcomes quickly, efficiently, and not delay the inevitable outcome you want to get out of something. Yeah, as long as the process meets that requirement, fast, efficient, and meeting the business goals, the process stays there. Otherwise, we should have the culture to challenge and openly talk about it. That could be one of the first steps of disrupting something in your language. Yeah.
Yeah, agree to it. So I'll quickly share my experience. I was heading an initiative of digital transformation, which was automating the BFSI processes in the BFSI organization, which is majorly repeated things where different banking people were doing. Uh, so when we started that, the major thing for us is to talking to the stakeholders and convincing them that we can go ahead and automate this digitalized process. Getting a buy-in was the important factor. Once we have a buy-in from them, the second thing was, our process expert used to say, right, if you're going to automate the bad process, it's going to give you a faster bad output. It's not going to help you with that. So the second thing was, as you mentioned, right, we have to have a culture where we can go and talk about it. Once we had a buy-in from the stakeholders that we have to go and automate and digitalize the entire processes, which are processes, ensuring these processes are well vetted, and the changes which are needed to be done are done. And when we have a file process, then we went ahead towards the digitalization of that process. We deployed bot. For that, we were using automation tool. We did the coding in Python and R, and we deployed bots for those processes. So it was definitely building a. I can relate it to what you said right now, building a culture first where we can talk about the bad processes which are there in the system. And when we get a buy-in, when people are convinced, and then we go ahead and talk about making it using technology to make it more digitalized, making it work. So yeah, I agree to that. uh,
Yeah, one more comment before you step in and ask me the next question. I think if I look back at my career, all the bad processes which I had to make changes, I think you are my crisis man at the time we worked together, because you reacted very quickly to understand where we need to make those changes. So if I look back in our areas where we manage SaaS applications or technology initiatives, you're always one who would agree and try to provide an opinion in terms of where we need to make those changes. Looks like you still have that very strongly embedded in you. So good to see that. Yeah.
so there's sometime it happens, uh, we digitalize, or we evaluate the processes, and we find out we put up processes, or we have processes for in an organization for any XYZ thing. Let it be technology area, let it be business area, let it be sales processes, let it be HR initiatives and all. uh, how do we ensure this process scale system for the sustainable growth, right? uh, if we talk about growth today, any company could be at, say, x amount of revenue with x amount of people in the organization, right? That would change in coming years. That would become x 2x 3x in coming years. Let it be number of people, let it be the revenue of the organization. As the organization grows, how do you ensure that are scalable for the organization growth?
And again, a great follow-up question. Um, as someone who's part of the technology leadership, which which strongly is in the space of adoption of services we're building, right? The most important thing in terms of making sure processes are effective as the company scales and grows, in my personal opinion, is first when you create or review a process, uh, make sure whatever changes you're making is effectively communicated, if not to all of the audience, a subset of an audience who can be critical and review it and provide their opinion strongly. Yeah, that could be one of the many first steps, in my opinion. And pick those people the right way, not anyone, but somebody who's close to that process who are going to be using that very regularly, right? Uh, Picking a subset of that audience to start with becomes the number one priority. Um, the second thing is, while we are going about implementing it, making sure we are constantly measuring the adoption metrics of those process. Yeah. So every process has a certain adoption metrics. If you're building a fantastic budgeting tool within your finance system, it's good to go and see what is the number of hits do you really have on it, how many people in your company are actually using it, and how many are still driving the same budget process still through Excel, which they did 5 years back, right? That's just one great example where you could really see, if you put in a process for budgeting, if we have adoption metrics, how can we review that on a more regular basis and then fine tune it according? None of the processes are a one time activity where you set something up and then you look at people to, you know, follow it. It's not going to happen that way. Everything requires a level of iteration. And if I want to go back to your automation example, uh, bad processes became bad automation and bad outcomes, right? So great processes become so valuable to business. So building a nice process and then leveraging the levers of automation and scaling and all the other options makes it a much better outcome for our consumers. And having the right adoption metrics will be the cherry on the cake, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, sometime when we evaluate process, normally what I look at it as, whatever we are putting as a process, or even technology adaptation, are we making it easier or harder to do the right things, right? If we need a certain outputs, with and by implementing a process, uh, are we able to get those output in a easier and a better way, or with that process we are making it more harder to get those outputs? I guess that would also help us to evaluate, something which is more easier to adapt and easier to implement and easier to give right output will go for a longer duration, rather than something which is looks like a very interesting process, complex process, but it is very hard to adapt, and which takes times for people to adapt because of the hard or complex process. It may not, go for a long run perspective. I would say it will, process may not scale for the sustainability as the organization grow.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Just to add to that, before you jump to the next question, I think any new technology offering or a process change you make, like I said earlier about picking small community of people, the other thing is we always need to show the bright spot. For example, if you're releasing a new process or a new tech, first thing you need to have yourself as a process owner or a technology owner is the ambition that we want this to succeed, right? Once you have the ambition converts into itself into the next good step, which is showcasing the bright spots. For example, you want a product which you want everybody to adopt in your organization, pick up some champions and make sure they're showcasing it to a large number of people in that community. For example, if you're bringing in a new tech, let's say Copilot for developers, right? Making sure you bring in that tech and showcasing it to the wide range of engineering community you have, and not just showcasing the product itself, but specific use cases in terms of what that can do to our day-to-day job, how can it really impact, etc. Once our community of users start seeing those bright spots, those amazing outcomes which you can get out of that, right? Then it becomes a more easier layer of adoption for that particular process or tech, because you're not forcing anybody. All you're saying is what it can do to your life, right? And then they're going to see and say, all right, if it can do such good things to Kunal and Sai, let me just take that as part of my day-to-day stuff, and it becomes a much more easier adoption story for us as an organization, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And as an organization, everybody has to keep evolving, right? The one important factor it is like we have to identify the signs for the process is stalling innovation rather than enabling it, right? So if we identify processes which is stalling uh, innovation and not uh, you know and backing it up rather than or not enabling it, uh, I guess we have to identify those process as well. Sometimes it take delay. I mean, it delays to identify those processes which is killing the innovation of of things from a technology standpoint. Uh, what could be those early signs? Do you think to identify those uh, processes which are processes are stalling the innovation or killing the innovation or rather than enabling the innovation?
Yeah, I think good follow-up question. In my opinion, the early signs are going to be, obviously, everything new thing you roll out, you're going to follow it up with a level of feedback mechanism, either a feedback form or a forum of brown back sessions where people are able to open up and talk about it, right? The early signs is the number of critical feedback which you're going to get out of it, and number of positive feedback. You got to look at both. If the critical feedback need to be reviewed timely, and if that kind of outweighs the positive outcomes, right? That's one of, in my opinion, that of one of the many things. And if I have to call out specifically, what would I look at in that critical feedback is the amount of time it takes, the number of meetings it takes to go through and get to an outcome following that process, right? Those are some early signs, because if someone is having 8 to 10 sessions to get something out of the line, something over the line for their company or for their initiatives, that clearly is a huge red flag where you're saying that this process is not working, because obviously each hour a person in your company spends is dollar figure or pound figure or rupee figure. So you basically, if that takes 10 times of their effort, that's not a good process, and you got to go back to the whiteboard and you know re-emphasize on what you need to change. So in my opinion, the feedback mechanism, the early warning signs in it, and making sure we carefully review and call that out and make those changes, that's what I would call as one of the reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So we spoke about people culture. We spoke about processes. I mean, we being from a technology background. Before I just start the discussion points for technology, I would like you can give your inputs on what are the areas of technology you have been working in your domain right now. Uh, I am aware of it, but for the audience, can you just let us know what are the areas of technology you have been working right now in Dunnhumby?
All right, great question, Kunal. Thank you. Yeah, I want to call out that I've been Dunnhumby has been a fantastic place, because it's a company which looks at touching the lives of many customers, right? And that's one of our key KPIs. We work in a very specific domain, which is large retail firms, right? And which means we create products for these large retail firms as well as the customers. We have this triangle where you know it's not our purpose is not linked to just create success for our for retailers or the CPGs. Our purpose is the end customer itself, which makes us very unique as a company, right? Now, when a company is so unique, then what mostly kind of helps a firm like that is the tech stack or the underlying tech which drives that outcome. Like I said, we are a data science company, a customer data science company, and we are a product company in that space. We build products in the same space, right? So to build products in that space, the tech stack becomes critical. My role in Dunnhumby is I'm responsible for the underlying hosting capabilities of all of our product platforms. What I mean by that is we are responsible for the overall reliability, availability of the product, right? We are responsible for the underlying security of our data, of our data points underneath, right? We are responsible for our overall cost of implementing a product on the cloud. So we do have metrics to measure that, and we're also responsible for the overall DevOps tool stack, which enables our developers to release features to our customers on a more regular basis. So we decide on that tech stack, what makes the best tech stack, right? So if you bring it all together, uh, my role becomes our tech stack becomes pretty interesting in terms of security, scalability, the cloud platforms, our DevOps capability in terms of our release platforms. So together, it becomes a very interesting space for us to talk about today for the next few minutes. Yep.
Great. So, when you talk about technology, when from people like us is more towards looking at tools adoption, or having innovating tools, for our processes or for our teams, or even for the organization level, and we invest in that cutting edge tools. The challenge comes in when we see low adoption of those tools, right? Uh, we identify the tool, we identify a situation where we need to have certain tools, which is having a cutting edge technology for us, uh, and when then we see a less adoption, uh, that is something which is take us back, right? So what is your playbook to auto correct those situations? You identified a tool for your DevOps and all, and then you are seeing the team is not uh, adopting it. So what is your playbook to course correct those uh, situation?
Great. Yeah, I think it's a broad question, but I'll try to keep it straightforward with one or two points in response. Uh, my goal in terms of how we first improved adoption is obviously the foundational layer for us is picking the right cloud partners, the base platforms, right? So we've been lucky that we've built strong relationships with Google and Azure in terms of making them as our standard cloud platform offering. Yeah. So that enables us to leverage the native capabilities of these two platforms, which don't stay stagnant because they release features almost every day, and makes it very interesting for us to see what are the plethora of offerings we're going to be giving to our developers in terms of what they can bring into their product. That's step one, right? Now, the next step comes in. Keep in mind the cloud layer is just your foundational platform, and it does provide you with an innumerable number of opportunities in terms of what you want to adopt out of them, right? But everything comes at a cost, right? So there isn't a, in my opinion, there is no one right answer on how do we make a product successful. Um, the first step would be to have a strong purpose on what you want to get out of a technology you're investing in, right? Why you are getting into that space? What do you want to do with that technology? That becomes a foundational question. The next step is, are we on track? Because implementing any technology is not going to be very straightforward where you get some outcomes in few days, because it involves people, like you said, right? And it involves certain outcomes like the number of releases you want to make, the number of alerts you want to gain, and the thresholds you're putting in, etc., right? Now it is an iterative process where you start looking at a technology, you start adopting it as part of your process. For example, since you asked a developer technology question, if you're enabling or looking to adopt a new CI tool or a CD tool into your tech stack, the it's important for us to go back and measure the outcomes and if it's aligning to your purpose. For example, is it really enabling the number of releases you're targeting? Is it easy for the developers to submit their merge requests? And is it flawlessly doing your pipelines the way you've configured it without too much of disruption or outages to our end customers? And again, if there is a path of improvement along the way, because if it's constantly stays stagnated where your releases are getting disrupted, your changes are getting into outages, then you know that product is not set for the culture we have in, right? So it's important for us to, again, just like we did for our process or the other decisions, it's important to do a regular checkpoint review on each of these layers, make sure it is suited to the company culture, the ways of working, and then make it more iterative and not be very immediate in terms of decision making, because these things take time. You got to give it the needed time and see if you're measuring the right outcome over a period of time, and that's how I would go about it. Sorry, long answer for a very crisp question there.
No, I absolutely agree. Tech adoption takes time. It is not always the technology, but it is also the change management. It couldn't be just not a tech issue, but it could be a change management area where we have to educate. stakeholders, look at the evaluate the outcome, and normally we look at like 3R approach. Right? We re-educate people. If we see the outcome is that we have to do a course correction, then we have to re-educate people, remarket the product or the new technology we are bringing in, new tech stack we are bringing in, and maybe sometime relaunch it. Right? If people are not agreeing on certain parts, then we have to relaunch it with the right thing. Uh, so yeah.
Can I add one more point there? Because what you just said resonated some thoughts in my mind, and I want to share that with you, right? See, no tech is perfect, be it coming from the big giants like Google or Microsoft or a newer firm which is just launching, right? The way the tech itself improves is based on the feedback which gets generated from its user community. Uh, if, a, if a technology has a numerous number of users, by default, the tech would not provide all the features for the user community to be successful. What makes it a solid product is if they're able to take the feedback mechanism coming from a group of technologists and then build features and release them in a more agile format, because agile is a new buzzword, uh, and meet the customers within a certain time of period instead of waiting for months or years, right? That makes it a more successful tech, in my opinion, because no tech is perfect. It can be good with the type of features we need, but it evolves when you start feeding it feedback and when you can make it more interesting by giving the consumers faster releases, newer feature releases based on what they need. Because in the end, the tech is going to learn from its users, right? And in my opinion, that's what makes technology more powerful than any of the other areas, because you can make those changes, you can release it. It doesn't have to be years. You can make it more agile. Does that make sense to you, Kunal?
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
And when we release it, or when we identify people who are uh, adapting to those new initiatives or new technology stacks, or a new tech product, uh, so we have to identify those champions, and maybe market them, or recognize their stories, what they have achieved using those new technology or the new tech stacks, what they have been doing, and how those outcome has benefited them. So those stories, identifying those champions also help sometimes. uh, and again, as we discussed earlier, and as we mentioned earlier during the process, it is also same here, that with the tech stack, and you just mentioned the same thing earlier, the tech stack which we are using, or the new tech we are using, for our processes, or for the business, or the product enhancements, or product development, uh, are those tech stack making things easier or harder, right? It is same for the process and technology both, right? The new technology which we are using is making things better and easier. If yes, then it can be adapted. But if it is making it harder, as you mentioned, how it is easy for a developer to merge their codes, right? So if it is making it more easier, it is something which is adaptable easily.
Yeah.
And with some
Uh,
of the tech stack, with the which normally is the uh, human mindset which keep coming for certain discussions. It came to my situation when we were implementing automation and doing digital transformation for a BFSI company, which I mentioned earlier. And it was, when we do automation, definitely is going to do a lot of tasks which are repeated tasks, and which is manual tasks. So there's always a question of fear of job, right? How come new tech stacks, or automation, or AI, would take up the job of the employees? Have you come across the situation earlier in your area?
yeah, I wouldn't call it earlier. I think it's happening right now as we talk, right? Because uh, the the way at which the pace of AI related innovation is happening right now among us in every company, tech firm, right? Uh, it does pose a question in a number of different jobs which people are in right now. That will I be as useful as I am right now in the future, right? To the firm. I think for most part, um, that's a valid concern because the scale at which AI is getting innovated or growing, it tends to, kind of post those questions. If we are not asking that question, then I don't think we're growing, in my opinion, right? But from what I've seen so far with my experience on the various AI tech we've adopted, uh, instead of making the job irrelevant, I think it's making the job more interesting. And I will give you some examples on why I feel that, right? So, first thing, I'll take a very simple example of a new AI tech we are looking to adopt in our company. For example, we're looking to adopt Copilot for GitHub, which is a developer AI Copilot or partner. Is going to help developers write great code, make sure that code gets tested faster, make sure that you know uh, the codes are optimized much faster than you used to. Because I'll give you some examples. So some of my senior developers recently, what used to take us weeks to develop a certain type of module. For example, we created a new asset management customized because we have a very unique security audit requirement. So we had to have certain things which a market product wouldn't meet our requirement. So some of my development team kind of build a proof of concept, which normally would take few weeks or months in few hours, right? And that's what the capability of AI is. Now, if you kind of post this and say, is that threat to my job? You know, maybe not, because it's just making that person much more efficient in terms of how quickly they can deliver something. What that means is they could use the time available to them in something more interesting and much more fruitful. Yeah. And that kind of has a direct impact in the company's bottom line and the investment we are making to those resources. So there's always two ways to look at anything, any other decision you make or any purpose you have in life. But in my opinion, AI is making our jobs way more interesting than it used to be. And I think it's going to be that way in coming days.
Yeah, I would say AI or digital transformation is not just about tech alone. It is more of a, uh, I would say, transformation which is led by people, enabled by process. If if AI has been strongly bound with people along with the enabled process, it will definitely give us the interesting results and faster results.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
when we were talking earlier, one quick point which came to my mind was when we talk about tech adaptation. So from the situation which I have gone through earlier, sometimes tech adaptations take time if we haven't you know gone through inbuilt thought process of what is we are trying to solve. If something is not if our tech adaptation or our tech uh, is not solving the problem of the frontline people, uh, they may not adopt it. So if we have to identify the problem before we adapt or before we even implement the tech, uh, and then adaptation will be more easier. So yeah, I just got in my mind while we were talking about the tech adoption.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, right? So I think any new tech you're looking to bring in for any layer of your business process, right? The fundamental reason becomes as simple as what's the business problem you're trying to solve, right? What is the cost of failure of that process if you don't bring in new tech? And what is the cost of the tech you're bringing in, right? And how do we measure the value of the tech during the initial phase of adoption, right? And obviously we need those the core champions, the users who are going to be able to showcase the benefit to a wider audience in any form, right? And we need to be able to measure the ROI in clear financial terms as and when you bring in the tech. Because if you don't do that, it's going to be another tech debt, which what we call it right now, in terms of spending money where we don't need to and making it more difficult for our community of users. Yeah. So you're absolutely spot on there, Kunal. Yeah.
And sometime why I came to this point, because sometimes we identify wrong tech. I would say not wrong tech. I would say uh, so example, we had automation and digital transformation before AI. Now we have AI. Before digital transformation, it was cloud, right? Which is boom. Sometime the tech leaders which I have seen. may focus of using the tech stack or involving the technology in the business is more of a shiny object, rather than something which is really solving the problem. So sometimes, people look forward for automation because they wanted to do automation as a shiny object, or feather in their cap, using automation. But is that solving the problem for the business? Is That's the question we normally, have to evaluate before we get into, interesting tech stack, or technology interesting technology in the market.
Yeah, that's what makes the tech roles, especially the management and the senior leadership roles, more complex, because your job's not done once you bring in or onboard a new tool into your tech stack or into your product line. The job's done when it's fully adopted and you see users wanting to use it, and when you see there's value in it, right? That's when you call it job done. You can add another new tool into your kitty, but if it's just going to be one in your budget sheet where you're going to be spending on invoices but not really see the number of users sitting on it, then it's a failed investment. But what is interesting is, as tech leaders, our job is never done because there's always a new product sitting in the market which can do something better. So it's always good to go back and revisit and see how each of your implementations are working, and not call it done, ever, in my opinion, because it's not something you can just call it done ever. It has to be an iterative, evolving process, in my opinion. Whatever areas of business you're implementing the tech for. Yep.
Yeah, agree. Tech is evolving, and we have to keep ourselves updated with what is happening in the market. Uh, so this is the ongoing process. Let be evolving ourselves. Let be, evaluating tech, evaluating process, evaluating people, having the right people. Uh, so if you come across any, transformation initiative, uh, right, which may need to evaluate, or maybe which, for example, and again, one of our previous experiences, we had a situation there. uh, we have to gone through, I mean, one of the company, we have to gone through the mergers, and when we go through the mergers, uh, you know, multiple times, uh, so you have to evaluate these things regularly, right? With the first merger, and we go through organization, we have to evaluate it, that if do we have right people after the merger, do we have right processes, uh, are the processes overlapping or not, are the technology overlapping or not, what do we need to evaluate right technology, because after the merger, their technology doing the same thing, or as an output, which of the technology is the right thing, and which is, which is going to give us the right ROI. So any such, transformation initiative, from your perspective, what is the definition of success, beyond just an ROI, right? We have, when we define any transformation journey, we define an ROI as well for it, that, when we evaluate from the ROI, but just from the apart from the ROI, uh, what is the success criteria or definition of success, do you think, from any transformation initiative, a leader should think of?
Great question. I'm going to quickly align this question to one of or few of the initiatives we are running in my firm, right? See, we are running an initiative where we want to keep our product availability absolutely top notch, better than our market, better than our competitors, right? As you know, if we can align it to a metric, for example, an availability metric could be 99.99, four nines, five nines, whatever you want to keep it, right? That's going to make, again, I'm going to revisit it the same way, right? Our transformation initiative was foundationally to improve our overall availability of our products. In that way, it impacts our customer experience directly, because more available our product is, more users they will use, and more users use, more outcomes they drive, and more outcomes they drive, more profitable their businesses are, right? That's just the rule book here, right? Now, how do we make sure a transformation initiative is successful? This could be your foundational metric where you say your availability and your ability to recover from a disaster or an outage is your foundational metric, right? But then it can't just be the only metric where you're measuring your success on, right? there has to be other metric, and I'll tell you what those are, right? You clearly called out ROI, so there should be a financial metric because you don't want to be spending millions and millions on a specific tech to get a positive outcome. The availability outcome is already in there. The user experience is also another metric we want to use, and how easy it is to use the tech, right? In our case, for us to make our product available, we invested in a very niche observability technology, which is a monitoring platform of choice, right? Now, there are many ways to use a monitoring platform. One is obviously the monitoring platform becomes effective if you're ingesting the right logs in there. But keep in mind, ingesting logs in a cloud based setup is very expensive because you can ingest it in many different places. You can do native ingest, but if you're ingesting logs which are not giving you any value, you're spending dollars which are not needed, right? So making sure there are metrics in terms of what type of logs are we really ingesting, that becomes a metric on its own, right? Your availability and recovery metric is on your own. There's another metric, right? And together, all of this together is what will tell you if a transformation is successful. Because if the tool can stop a disruption by directly calling an engineer instead of going through the chain of process of level 1, level 2, right? That's going to consume a lot of time and then you're failing in your outcome, right? But if that tool enables you to directly reach an engineer who's going to drive a fix or an outcome, then it becomes very powerful, right? So to summarize, the overall purpose of what you want to achieve, an underlying set of metrics like the financial metric, the log ingestion, then the ease of experience, and the time it takes for us to be able to solve a problem through that technology investment, which you're ultimately looking to transform for, right? So all of these together becomes a very interesting story to tell whether you want to call a transformation initiative successful, a failure, or a mediocre outcome, but still plenty of opportunities to make it a major success when you fine tune some of the log ingestions or maybe the alerting mechanism, so on and so forth. So that's just one example I thought I should give you. Yep.
Yeah, and just to add to what you have said is I believe it has to be, ongoing. Any transformation take long time, right? Evaluation is also ongoing process for them, right? We have to keep evaluating of the transformation which we have gone through uh, on a regular basis, right? Something which can give early wins has to ensure that wins is sustainable for a long growth as well. So
Yep.
yeah, this evaluation also has to happen on a regular basis of what has been done 6 months back, a year back, or 2 year back. Is it still happening? It will also give us early signs of stale processes, situations which we have to go and look at it. So any transformation journey has to be evaluated on a regular intervals to evaluate the transformation has been successful and it's still valid, and there are no stale processes or old technology which we are right now which has to be changed. So I believe, yeah, it is something that has to be ongoing process.
Yeah, and since you said ongoing, I want to just add a couple of comments there. See, the foundational reason for us picking a tech stack or implementing a transformation in a space of tech is only relevant for that particular time period of your product which exists and the customers which exist, right? That business outcome could change over a period of time. It's not going to remain stagnant because your product changes, right? Your product itself doesn't stay the same, it changes. When the product changes, your end customers changes. Obviously, the underlying transformation which you put in place for an earlier use case will have to change as well. Nothing stays stagnant, right? So if you just keep that logic in mind, it has to be an ongoing exercise. It can't be something where we call it in the legacy system where you can just say it's been implemented. It's no longer relevant in our current stream market, in my opinion. Yeah, because of how
Yeah,
it's evolving. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Because again, I had a similar situation earlier where we had been using good technology which was good for 10 years back, but that was not been before we get into digital transformation and automation era. That was not been evaluated for years, and that gives us a red signal. During my evaluation of the technology and processes when we were doing the merger of the company, and then we took up those processes and we identified that these evaluation has to happen regularly before we get to a situation that we identify, okay, we out of the technology is technology is already very old now, and people who are using the technology is outdated right now, and processes are outdated right now. So yeah, so that is something I discovered in one of the digital transformation journey which I worked on. And then we put across, yearly evaluation of the technology stack, compare with the market, what we have in market, and are we still behind or are we still on top of it. That evaluation process we started doing every year, so which was helpful for us.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear, Kunal. Yeah.
It was good, interesting discussion, Sai, with you. What what do you think? What would be the bottom line of our discussion? We spoke about culture, process, we people, technology a lot. Automation, AI, how you know how we can make sure technology is going to impact our customers at the end. We spoke about a lot of things. What do you think is the bottom line from your perspective in terms of sustainable growth, and how we balance people, process, and technology in it?
Great question, Kunal. See, the bottom line is whatever we do, the three pillars which you spoke about is ultimately for a purpose, for a reason, right? As long as we can focus on that one purpose, in my opinion, for what we do at Dunnhumby, it's for the overall customer experience of people who use our product, right? If that stays as your fundamental purpose, the three pillars can be very carefully evaluated and fine tuned to meet that ultimate requirement. Yeah. You bring in the right people to maintain the right customer experience. You put in the right processes to make sure the customers are happy. And then you bring the right tech, which is compatible, not just at one time, but on an ongoing partnership mode, right? So where it evolves with your customer journey. So as long as you can align it to that one purpose, which is your business purpose of customer experience, in my case, and it could be different for every firm, it becomes a very interesting area and something which can go the long run, right? It doesn't have to be a very, it can go through the long journey of where we make decisions based on these three key pillars. If you put that one thing in the center of everything. Yeah.
Okay. From my thought process, if I look at it, it is more of, uh, you know not giving for bottom line for me is more of synchronizing between process, people, and technology, rather than focusing on one and jumping to other and all. We have to synchronize between all these three areas for the sustainable growth.
Yeah,
Is that
that's a great point.
Yep.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think synchronization is another great word you could use. Yes, it all needs to work in tandem, and it has to be a balancing act. And it's not, it's not a place where you just invest one more in one area while you don't focus on the other two. It's a balancing act in the end, and that's what I think you're trying to say. Yep.
Yeah. It was a nice discussion, Sai. I mean, after some time now, we discussed a lot on the people, process, and technology, which we have been handling from 2 decades, I believe. It was nice having you on this episode as well for of Bottom Line. Um, Anything you want to add before we close today?
Thank you for inviting me to this, Kunal. And I think it's been a pleasure talking to you and your team. And like you said, you know, uh, this is a very interesting space. I'm glad I got to talk to somebody whom I am close to, whom I can relate to, whom I've trusted over a period of many years. And thanks for the opportunity. And it was very humbling experience sharing my personal journey. And it was great knowing your journey as well through this conversation. And I look forward to many more things in the coming days. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sai. Nice having you
Yeah.
here on the Bottom Line. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.